Welcome to Unpacking Peanuts, the podcast where three cartoonists take an in-depth look at the greatest comic strip of all time, Peanuts by Charles M. Schulz.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. It's Unpacking Peanuts, and we're here in 1989 checking out the best, the worst, the all of Charles Schulz's work here on Unpacking Peanuts. I'm Jimmy Gownley. I'm your host for the proceedings. Hey, I'm also a cartoonist. I did things like Amelia Rules, 7 Good Reasons Not to Grow Up, The Dumbest Idea Ever, and you could read my new comic Tanner Rocks for free on Substack at gvillecomics.substack.com. And joining me, as always, are my pals, co-hosts, and fellow cartoonists. He's a playwright and a composer, both for the band Complicated People, as well as for this very podcast. He's the co-creator of the original comic book price guide, the original editor for Amelia Rules, and the creator of such great strips as Strange Attractors, A Gathering of Spells, and Tangled River. It's Michael Cohen.
Say hey.
And he's the executive producer and writer of Mystery Science Theater 3000, a former vice president of Archie Comics, and the current creator of the Instagram sensation Sweetest Beasts. Harold Buchholz.
Who, me?
Yeah, you. So we are here in 1989, wrapping up another decade. It seems hard to believe that we've been at it long enough that we could get this far out. First off, thank all of you guys out there for listening this long, and thank you for following along with us. And to my pals, co-hosts, fellow cartoonists, and producer Liz, thanks for sticking it out on this journey with me. This has been a lot of fun so far.
Yes.
Yeah.
Harold, I have a feeling you have something that you're going to tell us about what Schulz was up to in 1989. I don't know why I have that feeling. I just have it.
Well, I do have something that I hope will be of interest to our listeners and to you guys. As I'd mentioned before, I've been looking at Editor and Publisher magazine, which was for editors and publishers of newspapers, including the buyers of syndicated comic strips. It was a weekly publication. I subscribed to it when I was in college, and I was going back kind of chronologically with where we are in the strips to kind of see what's going on in the syndicated comic strip world. We've been looking at polls from newspaper readers, how's Peanuts doing? But this particular one that jumped out at me, I thought was fascinating. I love reading things in the past where people predict the future. It says a lot about their present that we kind of forget about. And it's interesting to see, how do we look at the future, and how close do we often get, and what biases do we have that sometimes maybe get us down the wrong path. So this is from a column that was called Shop Talk at 30. This is from August 5th, 1989. And it's called A Look at the Future of Syndicated Comics by a guy named David Seidman, who's been active in comics for years. He worked at Los Angeles Times Syndicate. I think he helped develop like Foxtrot and Dilbert. And he was an editor and wrote Disney Comics. He's just done a lot of things in the comics field over the years. And here are some things that he was saying that he thought might be happening in the future with syndicated comics. So, number one, he was saying the computer. He says it's going to cut back a cartoonist's drudge work and will do what assistants traditionally do: rule borders, cut pattern screens, fill in blacks, letter dialogue and captions, and store and retrieve reference material. Some software and peripherals can correct perspective, shrink or enlarge elements of a drawing, turn and move objects within a composition, or copy photographs. Goodbye light box and tracing paper. I think he pretty much nails that, right?
Yes, that's crazy.
And he says, this is interesting, as the computer assumes these chores, young cartoonists will find it harder to get an entry-level job as cartoonist assistants.
Yep.
Well, yeah, that's not the first thing I think of going back. It's like, oh, people just lost a job. And isn't it interesting that people almost never think of the jobs that go away
with technology? And
certainly young people don't look back on things and say, oh, I wish that cartoonist assistant job still existed.
Right. I want to be a letterer.
I guess a few would say, I wish I could be a apprentice under Jimmy Gownley, but
yeah.
It says when cartoonists finish drawing their comics, they will transfer them onto a computer screen. That is, if they have not done the drawing on the screen in the first place. Once the art is on screen, they will transmit it to their syndicate over the phone wires or by satellite. Okay, pretty close. The syndicate will then send the work to newspapers by the same method. That is true too. Used to be they'd have to mail these things out, weeks in advance. And so he said he predicted that lead time would shrink as well. Like Doonesbury had to be done weeks in advance, Bloom County. And I don't know if that's true, but I bet it is true. There's certainly nothing holding them back from being much, much tighter. Just like delivering a editorial cartoon. Why not be able to send your daily strip in a little bit later?
Right.
Because everything's electronic. There's no mail or anything. He's also talking about over the past few decades, comic size has been shrinking consistently. We've talked about that a lot. The newspapers were making the strips smaller and smaller. He says it will probably never get bigger. Space is tight in papers. He was right about that too. So you can kiss the dramatic continuity strip goodbye, which was already on its way out. And that's true. You couldn't tell a story with Steve Canyon
Right.
or whatever because the space was so small. You couldn't move a story forward. He said the readers will change. They will grow older. And that's also true. So his prediction based on that is there was the rise of liberated women in the 1920s with Tilly the Toiler and Ella Sanders and Winnie Winkle. As the baby boom brought us Peanuts, Dennis the Menace, Miss Peach, he was saying that there would be strips for older readers, often featuring older characters, like Crankshaft's the first one that comes to mind for me. So I thought that was interesting. And then he says one innovation that could actually widen the range of comic subjects and styles is video text or any other method of sending newspaper material electronically.
Wow.
Video text comics will be free of a newspaper's tight grid, giving cartoonists some room for experiments, but not a lot. Most of the first video text comics will be conventional newspaper comics rather than anything created expressly for video text because they had got a built-in readership and they're cheap. It says these comics will set the format, and as any editor can tell you, it is hard to establish a new comics format once one has been set. Boy, that is true.
Yeah, this guy's a wizard.
Yeah, Scott McCloud, who wrote Understanding Comics, we've talked about him a lot. He was so into like the infinite scrolling comic. Think of all the things you can do with comics. And it just took years and years and years for anybody to actually figure something out that people wanted to read that was not in the standard format. And still the standard format is just by far the most common. Mm. It's so strange how technology allows something to happen, but we don't necessarily want the full range of what that can be.
Right.
Then he starts talking about syndicates having other ways to sell comics. Merchandising will get bigger as new tech creates new products. How about Calvin and Hobbes poster on your wall and an animated hologram?
My dream come true.
Will United Features Syndicate license genetic engineers to create real live Snoopies?
No.
Let's not do that one. Let's skip that one.
You'll see comics characters in new cartoons, not reprints created for other media, such as, book publishing, graphic novels. Syndicates that belong to multimedia conglomerates will get a head start in expanding into such projects. The one thing he's getting wrong is syndicates. Yeah. Because he's writing for people who are syndicate people.
Right.
And he's saying, I think the future is going to be bright, buddy. Don't worry. I think he probably knew better, but he had to say that stuff to get this published.
Yeah.
So last thing I'm going to share. He says, here is the scene in the studio of a 21st century cartoonist. The cartoonist sits hunched over his table. He's designing an interactive video cassette based on their comic strip, which deals with a middle-aged couple and their teenage kids. Her editor calls about the last batch of art that she transmitted to the syndicate. One of the gags is a pun, and the editor says, come on, that's not going to play in Beijing. The cartoonist jots a note, redo Thursday gag, no puns. So with the international nature of it, he was also saying that was going to happen. And then he says, when she is satisfied with the cartoon, she slides it onto her art scanner. The machine puts a copy of the art on her computer's monitor. With a few fast keystrokes, the cartoonist lays in pattern screens, fills in blacks, letters the word balloons, types in the copyright notice, and transmits the art to her syndicate. So pretty good, David Seidman, to be able to see where things went. I think he was pretty correct. And this is the world that Schultz is in. He's going to see the introduction of the internet in about 6 years, really kind of to the general public. And all of this stuff is going to be right on the tail end of his career.
Well, that's really interesting, Harold. And thank you, as always, for doing all that research. I think, it's hard to really put in perspective what a 50-year career is and the amount of changes that go on in 50 years. And that was a really eventful 50 years.
It was, yeah.
Almost no television around to the internet is a big leap.
Well, he kind of threaded the needle too. To have a 50-year career in comics, you can't have lived too much younger or too much later.
Yeah.
This was a window where something was consistent enough for 50 years that Schultz could do what Schultz did and make it a whole and make it feel like it's all of a piece.
Well, that is fantastic. So what do you say, guys? With that prelude, shall we hit the strips here in 1989?
Sure.
Let's do it.
All right. So if you characters want to follow along, there's a couple ways you can do it. First thing you got to do is go over to unpackingpeanuts.com, sign up for the Great Peanuts Reread. That will give you an email once a month from us letting you know what strips we're going to be covering in upcoming episodes. And then if you want to read them all for free, they're available on gocomics.com. Andrews McMeel, the wonderful syndicate and publisher of Peanuts, allows them to be up there for free. So you could read all of these along with us. It won't cost you a penny unless you happen to have a little coin in your pocket and you want to get fancy. You could buy those Fantagraphics books or the Andrews McMeel Decades books. And that's how you could follow along with us. So with all that being said, here we go. January 10th. It's a single panel daily, and we have a whole crew of people sitting on the benches in the schoolyard eating their lunches. And Linus is reading the newspaper because he's an informed young lad. And he reads, "Listen to this. There's going to be an ugly dog contest." To which Violet, in pigtails no less, says, "Ugly dog?" And then Lucy, looking at Snoopy, who is all shaken up and looking a little worse for wear, Lucy says, "I think I've already found the winner." Now, the reason I wanted to talk about this is the pigtails.
Well, it would describe Snoopy's expression. If it's very puzzling.
Snoopy looked like he has a hangover. He's holding his head, his tongue's out, his eyes are crossed, and his ears are wrinkled and sticking out at right angles.
Okay. I can't really read that expression.
It's so odd.
It does look like he's a little nauseous. And what's he reacting to? I mean, Lucy just insulted him.
When I read it, I thought he was actually trying to look like the ugly dog and be the winner. But now when I'm looking at it, I'm thinking maybe that's not what Schultz was going for. Maybe there's with no explanation, Snoopy's not feeling well. But that seems like a very odd choice, you know?
Yeah, it's really strange. I think, I think Snoopy has a hangover. No, I feel like
too many root beers with Bill Malden.
Yeah, I do exactly. No, I think for Schultz, it's like at this point. I mean, it feels to me like this is fatigue setting in. Like, I'm not going to do a whole other strip explaining why Snoopy. He's just going to be making a face. I don't think it particularly works as a strip. But the reason I picked it was because why 40 years later is Violet there in her original hairstyle?
Yeah. Very puzzling because we haven't seen her in years.
And it's not necessary. She doesn't have to repeat the ugly dog. It would work without it.
Yeah. Well, also it's not necessary, but the fact that if he was thinking in terms of balancing, he has his big black waste can in the middle and he's got Lucy on the right. So you'd think that if he was doing a spotting blacks thing, he'd want somebody on the left with black hair. Just to balance out the panel. So Violet, one of the few characters with black hair, and Lucy are both on the right. So it's just a weird choice why he would pick her and make her look like she looked back in 1952.
Although Lucy's still in her classic dress and saddle shoes, and the little bow in the back and the collar.
It's confusing.
Yeah, the Sally's updated, and those two are classic. He might have just been feeling nostalgic. It's cool to see Violet, and it's cool to see the original.
Maybe she was in an animated special. He was thinking about her. Who knows? Yep. I will say the spotted blacks on the trash can, I find those incredibly distracting because they look like pen strokes to me. And whenever that happens, I get pulled out of the artwork and I see somebody drawing something rather than it representing whatever it's supposed to represent.
That's funny because I love that. I think that looks cool. And I remember the first time that ever happened, that Klaus Janson, who was an inker for the first time it ever happened, the first time I ever noticed that, Klaus Janson, who was an inker for Marvel in the 70s and 80s, and then for DC as well, had a really kind of scratchy, in some ways kind of ugly finishing style, but he used a lot of techniques where you could see the tools. And the first time I noticed, like, oh my God, that's a Sharpie. And he just like scraped it across this guy's, and it looks like a sleeve. I was blown away.
Really?
I think that, I think that's so
like
cool.
Jack Kirby back in the early mid 50s. It was doing like Boys Ranch and that sort of stuff. That is, I mean, and later as he goes later, he just has these elemental brush strokes that aren't hiding that they're brush strokes. They're just, and I can't read it. I can't look at it. It's just,
sorry, that's not his inking. So
he didn't do Boys Ranch.
He didn't ink.
No, but he rarely inked. It was Joe Simon.
Simon did that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm surprised. Okay, well,
yeah, and Simon's inking is that puddly. I think it's muddled, compared to like Kirby's later inkers like Joe Sinnott and stuff like that.
Interesting. But I wonder if they were kind of following in the style of Simon, since Simon and Kirby were partners so much.
Yeah, but Simon was definitely inking and co-writing.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I wonder, so are there any inkers that fought against that, even when Kirby was doing those really kind of bold images? Where it looked a little more.
There's the whole school.
No, I mean like
whole school of very clean inkers
inking Kirby stuff,
I have no idea.
like in the 70s.
Yeah, well, I had the example I can think of is in 1976. There's it's actually, you can get it. Well, it's kind of expensive to find it, but it's called Captain America's Bicentennial Battles. Mm-hmm. Actually, you can get it in reprint, but it was those big 9x12 comics they used to put out in the 70s, and this was for the bicentennial. And Barry Windsor Smith inks a bunch of pages of Jack Kirby, wow. And it's in his period where he's like all very elaborate, like pre-Raphaelite Barry Windsor Smith inking over Kirby, and it looks weird. I'll send a photo to Liz and we can put it up on the obscurity page, because it really shows the difference between what one person inking an artist looks like versus another one. It can totally change the vibe of the piece.
And apparently Kirby did not care who inked him.
Really.
He turned the work in and probably never saw it again.
Wow. Right. January 15th. It's a Sunday and Snoopy's out in a good old frozen pond and he's having a fine time. He just hops out there on the ice and starts skating around on his paws like he is wont to do. And Lucy's also skating. She watches this for a little bit, but then she says to Snoopy, and she's sort of annoyed by this, "That's not skating, that's sliding." And then she continues ranting at Snoopy. "You don't have any skates on. You're just sliding on your feet. That's not skating. Skating is when you have skates on. You're not skating at all. You're just sliding." And with this, an upset Snoopy walks away saying, "How could I have been so stupid?" And then he sits on a bench off the side of the ice and says, "I thought I was having fun."
Oh.
Now, why would Snoopy care what Lucy thinks about what he's doing?
Good question.
I mean, she's one of these nitpicky people who's going to complain about every little thing. You just ignore her.
I think, an earlier Snoopy probably would, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. He would have, given her a kiss or something on the nose and say, "Sorry, sweetie,"
And then you have some snappy comeback.
But every once in a while, Snoopy has that where someone hits him with the truth that he has to go and contemplate for a while.
And this actually, I think, because that's where he is. When you see that little image of him sitting alone on a bench with this kind of forlorn look on his face, it's like, oh, poor Snoopy. But on reflection, seeing this strip again for us talking about it, my main concern is because Schultz has the kind of an uneven line for these vertical lines that represent ice. It kind of looks like the ice is steaming and melting away. So I'm getting nervous for Lucy and Snoopy here.
They're going to end up underneath.
I think it's interesting that Schultz it really works well for me that he has ruled panels that are straight lines, and then he will not use a ruler for the insides where the characters live.
Mm-hmm.
So they do seem to have this life of their own that separates themselves from the panel borders. And that's visually really appealing to me. I like that he does that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I never thought about it that way, but that's really cool.
Do we have anything to say about Snoopy Watch?
Michael?
He looks different to me in this one.
I think he looks different to me on that second tier, first panel.
Yeah, it almost looks like Jim Woodring in that.
Like Jim.
Panel 3 there. No, I mean, he does look like more like a stuffed animal, I think, these days.
I love how his little nose in the third to last panel drops down further than where it normally would be while he's looking down. It's like the nose is looking as well. That's really cute.
Yes.
And also the second to last panel, the nose is lower than normal, which suggests maybe a little depression or deflation.
Sad,
which is amazing cartooning, that you move things that shouldn't be moved because emotionally somehow they feel right.
Yeah. And you can get in your own head about stuff like that. And I can't do that because of and it's always the wrong attitude to get in your own head about it. You got to follow Schultz's advice and just, if it feels right and looks right, it's
very
right.
freeing. And even in that last panel, the nose and the eyes are super close to each other. More so, I think the nose should be further off to the left. And that somehow adds to the little forlorn look, like the eyes are kind of coming together, looking at nothing in particular, kind of a nearsighted kind of look. He's a genius.
He certainly is. January 16th. Lucy, Charlie Brown, and Snoopy are all sitting on the couch looking at a photo album, and Charlie Brown says, "See, it's a photograph of all the puppies. Snoopy and Spike are right there in front." Lucy says, "But who's that in the back row?" And Snoopy, very excited, says, "Olaf, that's Olaf." And Lucy says to Charlie Brown, "He's the one we should invite to the ugly dog contest." And Snoopy, pondering this, says, "Ugly Olaf. That's what they used to call him."
These are pretty cruel.
Yeah, so poor Olaf here has been slighted his whole life, it seems.
Yeah, poor fella.
I love Olaf. I'm excited that we're about to see Olaf. And the reason I picked that one is basically because I wanted to set it up for this next one here.
Man, but before we go, I mean, there is an odd visual under the Zipatone on the couch in the second panel. There's no shading in the first panel other than the Zipatone behind Charlie Brown, Lucy, and Snoopy all sitting together.
I know what it is.
And it looks like stuff that didn't get erased.
That's what it is, yes.
And he laid it over, and you can't, or eraser shavings that got caught under there or whatever. Yeah. And there it is,
Yeah, you can see it right between Snoopy and Lucy, very clearly a line of, 8 dots or whatever. And then there's 2 between Charlie Brown and Lucy as well. Yep, that Zipatone was unforgiving.
Yes, I can attest to that.
January 26th. Oh, speaking of genius, here we go. We finally see good old Olaf, and who is entered, in fact, in the Ugly Dog contest. And in this instance, we see him on top of Snoopy's doghouse. And they're reminiscing, and Olaf talks to Snoopy. "Remember when we were puppies at the Daisy Hill Puppy Farm? I can't believe I've grown up to win an Ugly Dog contest." Then in panel 2, Olaf hurls himself head first off the doghouse, calmly thinking, "I think I'll hurt myself." To which Snoopy replies, "Olaf!" and is shocked. Then in the last panel, we see Olaf just perched on top of his head. He is upside down. He's landed on his head. And Snoopy's looking down off the doghouse at him. And Olaf says, "Not to worry. I've done this before."
Wow.
Heavy.
This is one of my top 4 or 5 favorite Peanut strips.
Really?
I don't know why, but I remember that where I was standing in my friend Mark's house reading it at his kitchen table. I remember the day, and I burst out laughing at panel 2. I think that is just the funniest thing, that this dog has just decided to basically end himself, but in the most daily newspaper friendly way.
Well, this is a disturbing strip. You can certainly read it that way. I mean, and Schultz, yeah, he's won an ugly dog contest. So the world has labeled him ugly officially. And then, like you say, he just, in the least amount of effort possible,
That's the
in
joke.
exactly the same pose. His little arms are now up as his head is heading downward.
Yes.
But it's like if it's just a picture of him standing, if you flipped it over on the grass,
Upside
nothing
down,
has changed, including his hat, But he's like, I think I'll hurt myself. It's like, like that's, I mean, to say it that way is really, really
raw.
It's raw.
You think the editors interfered? You think he had, I think I'll kill myself?
I think he self-censored himself, but I'm sure that was the original thought.
But then
that's how I
the
feel.
third panel kind of suggests he was thinking of hurt because he says, not to worry, I've done this before. But the disturbing thing is, don't worry, I've done this before. I've hurt myself before. I'm like, oh my gosh, Olaf. We just met this guy.
Olaf has deep issues.
This is like, I mean, I thought Spike was sad. Olaf. Oh my gosh.
Well, someone wrote in a while ago and said something about how Spike is like Snoopy's shadow, and it's what he would be if he didn't have the gang. And here's another dog that's overweight. Snoopy's obsessed with eating. He's depressed. There might be a way to look at these Snoopy siblings almost as Snoopy surrogates, like alternate.
The Marvel What If is now the Snoopy What If.
Yeah, there, but for the greats of the Great Pumpkin Go I kind of thing,
Yeah.
But I don't know, that drawing, that like you described it, with the least amount of effort possible, I think I'll hurt myself. I don't know why. It just made me laugh. It could be me.
But I'm glad he has the hat. It seems like it's a good cushion.
Oh, absolutely. It's an approachable hat. And it serves as a safety device.
I will have to see if I can find that approachable hat for myself. I won't throw myself off of Doghouse.
Yeah, don't do that. January 30th. Snoopy's out in the snow and he's carrying a hockey stick and he says, I hate playing hockey on Woodstock's home ice. And we go to Woodstock's home ice, which is just a bird bath. And Snoopy says, at other rinks, they play the national anthem before the game. And then in the last panel, we see them doing a little dance, and Snoopy, with a really annoyed look on his face, explains, here we have to do the hokey pokey.
That's what it's all about.
That is what it's all about.
Now, wait a minute. Somebody will know. What is the origin of this song? Was it a hit song?
The hokey pokey, was it a hit?
Well, I mean, did it come out as a 45?
Well, I remember on American Bandstand, they said it had a good beat and you could dance to it.
But what's its origin? Somebody had to have written the song.
The hokey pokey, as it is known in the United States and Canada, or hokey cokey, as it is known in the United Kingdom, Ireland, and some parts of Australia and the Caribbean, is a participation dance with a distinctive accompanying tune. It originates in a British folk dance.
So somebody's like collecting royalties every time somebody does this?
I don't think so. No, because it started in Scotland in 1842, so I don't think anyone's collecting royalties on the hokey pokey.
But it probably was the first dance craze ever.
Nah.
Or the hocus pocus. That's the Roman version of it.
People just disappeared at the end of it.
That's what it's all about, is what makes that song.
February 5th. Charlie Brown's on the phone. Really? That's terrible. They probably should get a dog. And he walks out while he's saying this. And then he relates whatever he has heard on the phone to Snoopy. I don't suppose you heard the latest? The house next to us was broken into last night. Charlie Brown continues. They say the best thing for keeping away intruders is a dog who barks and has big fangs. Then he says to Snoopy, let's see your fangs. To which Snoopy flashes a very charming little grin. Charlie Brown walks away saying, maybe we can get a bazooka. To which Snoopy replies, woof. Now, they already have at least 2 machine guns at the Brown household. So I think the Browns have got it covered as home safety wise.
Oh, it's nice that he has a little inscription to "Happy Birthday, Meredith" in the last panel up the side of the panel, saying hello
that's
to
so nice.
these kids.
And it was your 17th birthday too, isn't it?
That was my 17th birthday. Yeah, that's right. I wonder what I was doing. February 5th, 1979 or 1989. I don't remember. It must have been a great one. February 8th. Charlie Brown is hanging out in the beanbag chair watching TV. And the TV is reporting some news, it seems. And he says, thousands of people paraded happily through the streets, but economists predict the cleanup will be costly. Then the next panel, skies were sunny today, but economists warn that this could cause an increase in the price of sunglasses. And then the third panel, which sends Charlie Brown into his feet up in the air pose, is, although audiences across the country love the film, economists are saying it will probably lose money. This is a great one, because first off, economists ruin everything. But this is like, I remember 1989. This was the year of the Batman movie, the Tim Burton, Michael Keaton Batman movie, which would come out in just a few months after this. And all of the stories after it, around Christmas time, after it had conquered the box office and it had all this merchandise and there were the VHSs were coming out for Christmas. It was, of course, it still will not make money with, famous Hollywood accounting. Well, that's when it got famous, really.
It's probably happened before, but this is one time when a Peanuts character doesn't talk in a strip with talking. That's got to be kind of rare, right? It's all just his reaction with the old classic feet up in the air response. Yeah. But I don't remember, there's probably one or two, but I don't remember a strip where there's dialogue, but it's not one of the characters.
Yeah, there might be another TV strip at some point that would do that. That's definitely a window for him to do something like that. But
Sally generally throws insults at the TV, though.
Yeah, that's right. She would usually make a comment. February 13th. Charlie Brown's in a drugstore, it looks like, and he says, "Yes, ma'am, I'd like to buy a box of Valentine candy for a girl who doesn't know I exist." And he continues, "No, ma'am, nothing too expensive. I'll never have the nerve to give it to her anyway." Now that's some classic Charlie Brown consistency going all the way back.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's interesting. He has the red-haired girl in the strip and then he makes her move away. Then she kind of comes back without any fanfare. And now we're just assuming, I guess, this is still the little red-haired girl, but there's no indication of it.
Right. At least in this one, we find out the next strip that it is.
Yeah. He plays fast and loose with her being a part of the neighborhood, it seems like.
Right. Yeah. Well, and maybe there's 7 little red hair girls.
Maybe.
He just likes little redhead girls and he just hops from affection to affection. This is a weird observation. It's probably not worth much at all, but I'm interested that Charlie Brown's text, the first line, just slowly drops from the top panel border in each successive panel.
Oh, yeah.
And so the last one looks like it's sunk into the bottom of the word balloon where he's kind of depressed.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a thing or not, but I noticed that. And it somehow psychologically seemed to help his statement.
It really does. Whether he meant that or not, he might have felt it, just as the artist doing it. Boy, when you stare at these things too long, like looking at ma'am with that apostrophe, it just looks like some sort of alien sigil. It barely looks like a word anymore.
Yeah, and I was trying to think of, did he put enough detail into that dollar bill he's got in his hand?
He's got some jangly black on the dollar bill.
He has a packet of gummy worms he's trying to buy a card with.
Goomy?
What? Goomy? Where did you get that?
Gummy bears? Gummy worms? No?
What is happening
Gummy
now? Goomy.
It's got a double M.
I'm losing my mind.
It's German.
It's gummy bear.
It's Gummy.
Gummibär.
Oh my Lord.
I was introduced to gummy bears. They came from Germany, and my aunt lived in Germany, and she
doubling down on Gumi.
I understand that it might be correct, but no one else is calling them the Boston Celtics. It's a gummy bear.
Well, I am.
All right. Well, we'll go see the Celtics and have some gummy bears. It'll be fun.
All right.
Would there be any reason to have a fourth panel on this strip?
What would you see there, Liz?
No, I don't. I just think it's one where it's perfect with three.
Yeah, it
That's
really
true.
is. Yeah.
I'm so used to it now, I don't even notice.
That seems crazy. It seems like that should have had such an impact.
And it doesn't.
After having us read, 16,000, 15,000, whatever it is of these things. But it really doesn't. He mastered it pretty quickly. Except for those one panels, they're hard. They don't always work, I think.
Mm-hmm.
March 9th. Pigpen is at the psychiatry booth, and Lucy says to him, "Here's sort of a suggestion, Pigpen. Maybe you could start by trying to go for just 1 hour without getting dirty. What would happen if you tried that?" To which Pigpen replies, "Do you have any idea how painful a migraine can be?"
No.
I do. Migraines are bad. So if Pigpen...
I never had one.
Oh, really? Oh, God. Well, good. I hope you never do. They can last for days, and you get the aura where you can't even look at a light. Oh, it's terrible. So if this is the reason why Pigpen is filthy, I don't blame him.
Huh. I think it's a little odd that he brings Pigpen back for a couple of strips, considering he's two of what are now considered like major characters hardly appear this year at all. Rerun has one, and Franklin has two, or appears in two.
It's the rerun thing is really surprising to me as someone who's read the 90s stuff. Like, we are now, how many years are we into having rerun? Like 15, 16 years. And he has runs where it seems like he's making a stab at doing something with them, but then he just fades away again. And when you see him come back so strong in the 90s, it has to be tied to, I think, Schultz having kids in his life again as grandkids, because when you see he becomes the center of the whole strip.
Yeah, I'm curious to see it, but it hasn't happened yet.
Nope.
That's interesting.
Now, I wonder if Schultz ever said anything about how he chooses which characters to do in a particular strip. I mean, does the gag come first, or does he go, well, I haven't used Lucy enough this year?
He seemed to suggest that he would start with character, right? I mean, I've seen things where he talked about the keyboard. Each character is a key on the keyboard, and if you have a good set of characters, it gives you the full range of melody. And that sketching method that we've all seen.
Mm-hmm.
It just seems like, he has to start with a specific character, right? If he's doing the sketch with them in mind, which leads to the gag. But
and then I think, Michael, you're probably right in the part of him going, I haven't put Pigpen in a while. Like, I could imagine that being the impetus. And then he sits down with the sketch pad and just starts doodling Pigpen and sees what happens.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking at this second panel of close-up of Lucy in her psychiatric booth, and how tortured that vertical line is going down to the side of it.
And her sleeves there.
Mm.
Yeah, there's 16 different individual marks of tremor going down the side of one of those posts in her psychiatric booth. It's so weird that you can see, again, talking about process, and when you can see process in the art, how that can sometimes pull me out of it. That's been my concern going particularly into the 90s, that I'm going to be having a hard time actually seeing Schultz's, what he's doing with the characters, because I'm going to be seeing the line. I hope that's not the case. I'm generally being sucked into the art. It's usually when we're talking about it and looking at it a second time that really kind of pops out at me.
So let me ask you a question about this. Is this a cartooning specific thing, or does this extend to fine art? Like, let's say you're looking at a painting where, like, a Van Gogh versus a Renaissance painting where you don't see any of the brush strokes. You're more attracted to, say, the Renaissance where you don't see the brush strokes?
I'll just say, if I'm looking at a Van Gogh, I'm highly aware of the process. And so the overall experience of what the artist was depicting, it's almost like some people have like this perfect pitch thing where they can hear 2 octaves at the same time when someone's hitting a note just perfectly. That's like, and it's really cool, but at the same time it's distracting because it's this strange phenomenon in your ear. So when I look at a Van Gogh, it's like brush strokes, Starry Night, brush strokes, Starry Night, brush. It's like I'm hopping back and forth, and it's not necessarily a pleasant experience. I mean, I don't really get into Van Gogh stuff and I don't, maybe that's why, I don't know. But yeah, a Rembrandt, I can just dive into these characters and the shades and stuff, and it's just a whole to me versus me seeing the pieces. And I generally like to see the whole and experience the whole and get pulled into it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I feel like I'm the opposite. I had a professor in college who was also my advisor, this guy, Leonard Ragazeas, who was actually a great artist too. And I remember him talking about Vermeer once, and he said, you cannot see a brushstroke at all. Vermeer, that's why Vermeer is a saint. And then we were talking about Van Gogh, and he goes, you can see every brushstroke. That is why Van Gogh is a saint.
Well, I guess you can have it both ways then.
I get to, yeah, well, he could anyway. R.I.P. Leonard Ragazeas.
It'd be interesting to ask the listeners, is this ever an issue for you guys when you can see the pieces that go into a piece of art? Is that a cool thing? Do you like to see that? I love to look at like a comic strip original piece of artwork where I see I'm looking at it really close to see how he did it. But to experience it, I don't like it because I never get the full experience of the thing without it kind of being tainted by distraction. But to look at a Charles Schultz original, that's amazing. See the little pencil lines and this and that all around it.
Yeah, because you're studying it and taking it in like fine art more than reading it. Michael, where do you stand on this? Are you pro seeing the hand of the cartoonist or anti?
I like technique. I like seeing mastery. And so I will always go for somebody who can do like super clean detail. And yeah, so probably not so much with the brushstroke stuff. Mm-hmm. I like things that really, really look finished.
Right. All right. I am on my own in this. What about you, Liz? We can make it 2-2.
I was thinking about it in terms of film and noticing when the camera work makes me jump out and say, oh, that's camera work, rather than being involved in the story.
Yeah, totally with you on that.
You have to be such a master. Yeah, I think there's a couple moments in Quentin Tarantino movies where the camera moves, either stays where it is, where people move away from it, or the camera moves to a different position. And it's really interesting because you are so aware in that minute that it's Tarantino showing you something. Mm-hmm. And I think if you're a fan and you're aware, this is the kind of thing that happens, you're okay with it. And you're like, oh, it feels like a meta thing. I think if you just go into it as a movie, you might be distracted by it because you're not prepared for that sort of interference from the director. Anyway. Okay, guys. So listen, we got another Pigpen strip coming up right now, but we're going to take a break because, we just need to get some hydration and get some energy for the other half of this show. So we'll be back on the other side. Catch you then.
Hi, everyone. We love it when you write or call to tell us how much you enjoy the show. But don't just tell us. Tell your friends. Tell complete strangers. Share your appreciation in a review. It doesn't have to be on Apple Podcasts. 60% of you listen on other apps. Some of those apps have review sections. Think of all the poor Peanuts fans out there who haven't found us yet. There are review instructions on our website at unpackingpeanuts.com/spread the word. Thank you for your support. And now let's hear what some of you have to say.
And we're back. So, Liz, I'm hanging out here in the mailbox. Do we got anything?
We do. Friend of the show, Tim Young, writes again, and he says, from my point of view, Jimmy saw Star Wars practically the moment it came out. When he was 12, his family lived in a small town in southern Iowa with exactly one movie screen And that theater held over Smokey and the Bandit for what seemed like months. We didn't get to see Star Wars till November.
Wow.
Oh, so disappointing. Yeah. But I do remember Star Wars being held over for a long time too. And then I also remember the one that was either concurrent with Star Wars or right before or right after that they never got rid of was Saturday Night Fever in my local theater. That was there forever.
Then Christopher Ouellette, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Ouellette, writes on Facebook, he says, in all the previous episodes when you talked about Nancy, I thought you were talking about Kathy.
Oh.
I was shocked that it was written by a man and people were still fans. I don't read Nancy, but knowing what strip we're talking about makes it all much more sensible.
That does help. Listen, I don't know if this is too late, but this is not about the legume. This is actually about the comic strip Peanuts. So if there was any confusion there. That's funny. Yeah, I mean, I guess a lot of people, Nancy might not register at all anymore.
And then we have a new listener who seems to be binging things on YouTube because we got a bunch of comments from Ice Cream Hero 2375. First, he writes, or she says, I occasionally get emergency tests when I watch TV, because we talked about that.
So it's still going.
And at one point, we talked about the animation in the 80s going downhill. And Ice Cream Hero says, I don't know about that. Gem is amazing. It's such a fun show. So are you familiar with the animated series Gem?
I think that statement is truly outrageous.
Gem and the holograms. Yeah, I'm not terribly familiar with it, but my take on it, I was definitely into animation. I was considering becoming an animator in the 70s and 80s. And what I noticed was, the animation 70s is really, I think, a consistently rough decade for animation. There's definitely exceptions to that. But the thing I noticed, like on the Saturday morning level, was the Smurfs in the early 80s. When that came out, it was just a little bit better. And then everybody seemed to kind of raise their game a little bit every year, and the animation was getting more and more solid. I think a lot of young people who had grown up on like the Warner Brothers cartoons and the Disney stuff, they got pulled into animation, and I think from the bottom up, in a way, we lost all these master artists, and a bunch of young people came in who were just really, really into, why aren't they as good as they used to be? Let's make them what they like, what I remember. And quite a renaissance. And then to me, like the watershed moment was like 1988 when like Who Framed Roger Rabbit and Little Mermaid came out, and then we were off to the races again.
Yeah, the other thing on TV animation that I thought made that was kind of a demarcation point was DuckTales. DuckTales was just a better syndicated.
Yeah. Animaniacs, the Steven Spielberg, Warner Brothers stuff. Yeah, that just was head and shoulders above what had been before. Yeah.
And Ice Cream Hero continues with today's episode, September 3rd. I think you do is the funnier punchline. A pause before you do could be pretty funny because Lucy actually had to think about what Charlie Brown said.
Right. Yeah. I agree that does make a funny punchline. Yeah. Well, thanks, Ice Cream Hero. Yeah. That's cool.
Yeah. Just a panel of silent reflection always can make that next panel really hit harder. You can't overuse it, but speaking of overusing it, boy, I was realizing I was doing one facial expression in Tanner Rocks constantly. And I had to go back in and go like, what is wrong with you? And I had to like digitally erase a bunch of eyeballs. Like, it looks fine now, people. You won't know, but wow.
And Zverina also writes on YouTube from episode the 1962 part 2. So she or he writes, I too begged and bargained for a deferment when told I would have to start kindergarten. Just one more good year, I pleaded. I knew it was the beginning of the end.
Well, she was wise. They are wise. I was excited to go to kindergarten. I couldn't wait. And I remember like week 2 going, oh no, this is so much worse than I thought it would be. I thought it'd be great.
I thought that was a step up from nursery school personally, but that's just me.
We did not have nursery school in Gerardville.
That's it for comments and mail. Do you have anything on the hotline?
Got 2 things from the hotline. We heard from Todd Webb again. He wrote because he forgot to say some stuff while he was on. So he left a message for us, and we'll play it right here.
Hey guys, it's Todd Webb. We had such a fun chat the other day that something slipped right through my brain that I had wanted to bring up while we were talking about that 1988, 1989 era of Peanuts. One of the things I noticed when I was reading, specifically in 1989, was there was a couple of strips that struck me as Calvin and Hobbes-ish. In particular, there was one in February 6th, 1989, where the kids were sledding in a toboggan and they flew off the cliff and tumbled through the air, much like the famous Calvin and Hobbes routine, and had a casual conversation while they were doing it, which is what made me think of Calvin and Hobbes. There was also a bunch of strips of them leaning against tree trunks, and there's a strip in November, I believe it's the 19th, a Sunday strip of 1989, where Peppermint Patty is making a series of silly faces, which looks just like one of the more famous Calvin and Hobbes strips, which I didn't check the date on that Calvin strip, which I probably should have, but I'll let you guys do that. But anyway, my question and thing I wanted to point out was it's so obvious throughout the years where Schultz influenced other newspaper strips and they did Peanuts-esque things. But it's a rare instance when it seems to boomerang back the other direction. And it seems like 1989, Calvin Hobbes has been around for a few years, definitely climbing up the popularity charts. And it seems like Schultz was trying to put his own spin on some of the things that Watterson was trying with the kid in his comic, which is wildly different than the Peanuts King, but still shares some of the same comic strip DNA of kids' view of the world. So I just thought that would be something fun to discuss amongst yourselves since I'm not there right now. And that's all I got for you. Be a good cheer.
Yeah, definitely them going down the hill in some vehicle is something that Skippy did, and then Watterson did. I mean, Percy Crosby Skippy from the 30s. Well, there you go.
A bunch of kids in some sort of vehicle heading down a hill out of control, which is very reminiscent of my childhood. I had a go-kart that looks exactly like if you've ever read Amelia, it looks exactly like Reggie's Amazing Mobile, and it did not have brakes and it did not have a steering wheel.
Oh,
well, you called out Watterson in one of our very first episodes, saying that he stole it from Schultz. Something where I think Snoopy was sliding off of the doghouse.
Oh, really? I remember saying that it was the snowman sculptures that were, but I don't know. But yeah, so thank you, Todd. Always good to hear from Todd. And then we heard from somebody.
Hey, everybody. This is going to be a mysterious caller. Would rather not reveal my identity. Just a long-time listener, first-time caller. I was just thinking about what Jimmy screwed up there with the Pulitzer Prize winners, and I think I know what the problem was. I think in his mind, he was outraged about the fact that Trudeau won a Pulitzer before Pfeiffer. But then, in the heat of the moment, I think he transferred his unnecessary outrage to Breathitt winning before Trudeau. But you really can't tell with that guy because he's nuts. Anyway, keep up the good work. I'll keep listening. Be of good cheer. The masked caller.
Well, be of good cheer, masked caller.
First off, I think that makes a lot of sense. You're obviously a very bright person. And I have to say, I think you sound kind of hot. I'm assuming this is a very handsome man. So thank you for writing.
Yeah, and a little concerned about righteousness, I think.
All right, so that's the mailbox, huh?
That's it.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, we always love hearing from you. You can write to us at unpackingpeanuts@gmail.com. Leave a message there on YouTube or follow us on our socials, which I will give you at the end of the episode. But right now, let's go back to the strips. Pigpen's still hanging out at the psychiatrist booth here on March 10th. And he says, "Do you think you're going to be able to help me?" And Lucy replies, "I don't know, Pigpen. When I look at you, all I see is dirt and dust. You don't need a psychiatrist. You need an archaeologist." It's a bit of a callback.
That's a good punchline.
Yeah. He did something like this, right? You'd be in the Christmas special, at least, and I'm sure it was from one of the strips about how he carries the dust of ancient civilizations on him.
Mm-hmm.
Classic.
For a character who has only one joke, he is iconic worldwide.
Pretty amazing.
March 14th. It's a baseball game. Schroeder's out at the mound giving Charlie Brown the signals, and he says, 1 finger will mean a fastball and 2 fingers a curve. Charlie Brown says, "What about 3 fingers?" Schroeder, walking back to the plate, says, 3 fingers will mean let him hit it and we'll all go home. And then Charlie Brown says, "I'd be crazy to ask about 4 fingers." This is not good strategy. After all these thousands of baseball games, letting them hit the ball will not make you go home earlier.
So they did not have Sandlot rules of once you have X number of runs.
Yeah, but it's 10
over.
10 runs. That's a long time, and you still have to play 5 innings.
Well, what if these were 9 runs down? Would that be true for Schroeder?
Oh,
if they'd already given up for 9
that's
runs?
true. That's true. If we're in the middle, but why? No, but it has to be for the game, because why would he be giving the signals now? That could be why they're 9 runs down.
Yeah, he's like, maybe we should have a chat.
To sum up, there's deep problems with this baseball team. March 19th, one of them there, symbolic panels. We have a kite with Charlie Brown's head upside down on it. And then in the next a panel, we see him and Sally working on the kite. And he says to her, "Hold it just like that. Thank you." And then as he's setting up his kite, she says to him, "I don't understand you. Why do you keep trying to fly these kites when you always get them tangled around the tree? It always happens. Sometimes you don't even get out of our yard." Charlie Brown's ignoring all this, and he walks outside, or he walks towards the door anyway. And Sally yells out after him, "Wouldn't it be funny if you didn't even make it out the front door?" And then we see in the last panel, that is what happened. Charlie Brown says, "Very funny." And we see his kite got tangled in the coat rack in the foyer.
That's a gorgeous last panel.
Yeah.
Really.
And it's sometimes called a coat tree.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. Look at that. Even better.
But that front door, I don't remember seeing that front door at the house. I don't even know how they open it. You have to kind of jump and have arms taller than your head to get out the front door. I'm not as worried about the coat rack as I am Charlie Brown being able to get outside. But I just love that art. That is so pretty.
Yeah, it looks really good.
Now, Schultz is doing something in the last 2 or 3 years. I'm not a huge fan of it. The pupil that has the line through it, cutting off the top part of it, so it looks like your eye is half open. We see it in the second panel in the next to the symbolic one with Charlie Brown as he's saying, hold the kite, just Sally. And then you see it in the final panel as well. Just the line through the pupils, which is to kind of show that you're, I don't know. You can mean you're a little haughty. It could mean you're nonplussed. It could mean you're not.
Because on the one hand, in the second panel, it's like he's just professionally putting his kite together.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very subtle thing to try to capture with one dot of ink. Interesting. Oh, one thing I was thinking that you were talking recently a few episodes ago, Harold, about you don't like it when the line is across and it shows them being like disaffected throughout, like you talked about tumbleweeds and things like that. And I think what it is I think it's a great look, but it's salt. It's a seasoning. And you know what I mean? And when you have salt soup, it's not good. Nobody wants you have to use it.
Yeah. And I guess it became a thing, particularly I think in the 80s for Schultz would use it, this kind of thing, often for a character who's a jerk who just shows up, like Tybalt or whatever, and just being a really jerky person. And then taking the era of Garfield, the half open eye is the whole strip.
Yeah.
And it's kind of this dull cynicism that's supposed to be cool, and I'm like, bleh, no thanks.
Yeah, it's the whole strip that's the issue. You don't have all those notes on the keyboard if every one of them is minor.
Yeah. It's just like, I don't know. It's like asking you to go along with something that's maybe not the best. That's kind of the weird feeling it has to me sometimes.
March 26th. It's a Sunday, and Charlie Brown is reading a book in his easy chair, and he says to himself, "I'll bet he's still sleeping." And then we see him go out to the doghouse. And in the second tier, the strip starts off. Charlie Brown says, "Don't you think it's about time you got up?" And we see Snoopy tucked in very snugly in a sleeping bag on top of his doghouse. And he says to himself, "It was cold last night. I thought I was going to freeze to death. Well, I'm not going to be the only one who's getting up," he says. And then, having extricated himself from the sleeping bag, he yells, "Okay, everybody out." And we see a ton of little birds, the Beagle Scouts and maybe a few of their friends, come tumbling out of Snoopy's sleeping bag. I just love that last panel. I love the idea of Snoopy having a sleepover with all the little birds in his sleeping bag. I think it's really cute.
Yeah.
Do the birds have something? What is that dark area on the birds? I'm looking on Go Comics and it's not real clear.
That's their feet. It's just blurry because of Go Comics. I mean,
yeah, you got wing, foot, wing.
Oh, okay.
And they're all like next to each other. They look like a little accordion.
March 27th. Oh, Linus is sitting enjoying the day, and across his path comes the good old world famous lawyer. And Linus quotes, "The lawyer is evermore the leader in society." Snoopy hears this and thinks to himself, "I like that. I don't understand it, but I like it."
So we've had the lawyer ones popping up every so often for the last years. And I'm guessing that Schultz, not only having had to go through legal things simply because, well, when you're a multimillionaire, it seems like people wind up in court for various reasons. And I don't think he's an exception. But Snoopy, it just seems like he has this book of quotations. And every once in a while, he'll just pull it out and start to go through things to find a gag or whatever. And
yeah.
But I did look this one up. I was just like, okay, what exactly is this quote? And it's from 1895 Yale Law Journal.
Oh, I thought it was 1896. Okay, yeah, right.
Yeah. Well, that's a common misnomer, or misconception, I guess. But yeah, so I think it was the Supreme Court justice at the time. That was the beginning of his Yale Law Journal article. And then we see it again on the 14th of April. There's a "He who cannot dance puts blame on the floor" is another quote. So I'm guessing Schultz has some quotation books, and that's a Hindu or African proverb, depending on who you're asking. So yeah, I think what better way to get the juices flowing than to crack out the old quote book and see if you can get a good strip.
And it's great to have a character for like Linus who can just do it. And it seems like, yeah, it's reasonable. Linus could know that off the top of his head.
Yeah, right.
What kind of a hat is that?
It's a lawyer hat.
It's official lawyer hat.
It's a lawyer in hat. It's an approachable lawyer in hat.
Do you think that? I don't think a bowler is approachable. I think it's supposed to be a bowler.
The brim is too big for a bowler.
Okay, so it's like Pharrell wearing a lawyer hat.
It's a Pharrell lawyer hat.
Harold, don't choose that one.
Yeah, that's not a good one.
No, okay. I'll refrain.
March 28th. Lucy and Linus are on the couch and they're watching some TV. And Lucy says to Linus, "Do you think people ever really change?" To which Linus says, "Sure, I feel I've changed a lot this past year." To which Lucy replies, "I meant for the better."
Oh, she gets some zingers off this year.
She does. I think this works well as a 2-panel strip.
Yeah.
So you don't think it would be better if Linus's response and her response to him were separated by a panel?
Mm-mm.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me. I think it actually it gives the zinger extra punch because it's so fast.
Yep.
Okay.
But I think, but if it was 3 panels, it would work fine as well.
Mhm.
Pretty fancy looking couch there.
Yeah. Sipitone does wonders to your house.
Not an ectorp because it has that mound in the middle.
Yeah.
The Ectorp, yes.
March 29th, Peppermint Patty is playing Charlie Brown's team in a baseball game, and Marcy is behind the plate for Peppermint Patty's team. So she says to Peppermint Patty, "I'm your new catcher, sir." And she's all decked out in her gear. And Peppermint Patty says, "You look good, Marcy." To which Marcy says, "Are we going to have any omens?" Peppermint Patty says, "Signs, Marcy." Marcy says, "Whatever."
You use that punchline a lot, too.
Yeah.
That's always good for a laugh.
I think baseball signs should be called omens. I like it. And then, this is some exciting stuff going on. This is going to be real grist for the mill in terms of Marcy's psychology. So, on March 31st, Marcy walks up to the mound with Peppermint Patty on it, and she says to her, "Let's give Charles the old beanball right now, sir." Which, if you're not a baseball fan, means plunking him in the head. Peppermint Patty says, "Marcy, I can't believe you." Then Marcy walks back to the plate and says, "It's the new morality, sir. Win at all costs." Then she sets up behind the plate with Charlie Brown at the plate ready to bat and says to him, "I'm very fond of you, Charles, but stay loose."
Wow. Yeah, that is a revelation about Marcy. She's all about the proper etiquette when you're at the Tiny Tots concerts, but when it comes to sports, she's pretty loose with sports. She's like, "I don't like this stuff. Anything goes."
I'm very fond of you, but we're going to bean you. Now, that's our last strip for this episode, though. So that means that we're going to end on a cliffhanger. Does Charlie Brown get beamed? Does Marcy go to jail for manslaughter? We're going to have to find out. So I hope you will come back next week. Until then, if you want to keep the conversation going, there are several different ways you could do it. The first thing you could do is you could go hop over there to unpackingpeanuts.com and you sign up for the Great Peanuts Reread. That will give you one email a month, a little newsletter that lets you know what we're going to be talking about on this here show. Also, if you want to keep in touch with us on social media, we are at Unpack Peanuts on Instagram and Threads, and at Unpacking Peanuts on Facebook, Blue Sky, and YouTube. And we love to hear from you because when I don't hear, I worry. But that's it for this week. So come back next week with more of 1989. It'll be just as much fun. From Michael, Harold, and Liz, this is Jimmy saying, be of good cheer.
Yes.
Be of good cheer.
Unpacking Peanuts is copyright Jimmy Gownley, Michael Cohen, and Harold Buchholz. Produced and edited by Liz Sumner. Music by Michael Cohen. Additional voiceover by Aziza Shakrala Clark. For more from the show, follow Unpack Peanuts on Instagram and Threads. Unpacking Peanuts on Facebook, Blue Sky, and YouTube. For more about Jimmy, Michael, and Harold, visit unpackingpeanuts.com. Have a wonderful day, and thanks for listening.
Wing, foot, foot, wing.